Keeping it real, keeping it real. Keeping it real, keeping it real. Keeping it real with Reverend Laura.
I think one of the most frequently quoted passages in the New Testament comes from the book of John, John 3:16. If it's not the most quoted, it's certainly the most one that you see on the back of cars, more often than any other quote. And sometimes it's just the numbers, John 3:16. So, depending on the version of the Bible that you're reading, John 3:16 says something like this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whoever believeth in him shall have life everlasting and not perish." And so this is kind of the essence of who and what Jesus was this being that came from Spirit, that Spirit so loved, he brought it forth into existence and allowed it to become the being that we knew as Jesus of Nazareth. But let's take a moment and step back. As I said, that came from the New Testament. The New Testament is a collection of books that were chosen to represent the ideas of Christianity by a group of people in the 3rd century. And they decided that of the 12 apostles, all of whom had books written after them, only 4 of them were worth going into the new Bible. So we start off the New Testament with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those were 4 of the disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. So the first book of John, of the New Testament, the book of Matthew, was written somewhere around 20 years after the death of Jesus. It was not written by the man named Matthew. It was written by his followers. And what it was a written account of the oral stories. How many of you have ever played that telephone game? Where you say a sentence to one person and they say it to the next person, and then it goes all the way down the line, and then at the end of it somebody repeats the sentence back and we all laugh at how it changed. So, were these actual factual sayings of the man we know as Jesus? I don't know, I wasn't there. The book of Mark, Luke, and John were written sometime between 70 CE and 100 CE. So 40 to 70 years after the death of Jesus. And again, they are not written by the people they are named after. They are written by their followers. Recorded versions of the stories. So the Jews of 1st century spoke a language called Aramaic. But scholars and people who could write in the 1st century wrote in Greek. So we have stories told in Aramaic, written down in Greek. Probably a little translation issues there. Then, as the centuries progressed, those stories, those books, were rewritten because there weren't printing presses, there weren't anything else. People had to write them by hand. And so from the Greek, they moved into being recorded in Latin. Again, translation issues going on there. When we think of the word love, just the word love that we're talking about this month, in Greek there are 8 different words for love. And so you can imagine how that can get convoluted as you're translating from one language to another. And then, of course, in the middle of the 14th century, Johann Gutenberg invented his printing press, and he started printing them out to where other people could read them. And he printed in Latin. And eventually it was translated into Old English and other languages as it moved forth. All of that is to say, what's written in the New Testament may or may not be accurate. But that's not what's important. It's what it means for each one of us. It's what we get out of the message that's important here. It's not the literal translation of it. It's not the fact that it was written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. It's what it is when it comes alive inside of us. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a minute. I also want to remind you that there were other books written by the other disciples too. In 1945, in a town outside of Egypt, Nakamati, Egypt, in a cave, a man found a barrel, ceramic barrel full of manuscripts. And they have become known as the Gnostic Gospels. And there we have books from Thomas, Peter, Simon, James, Thaddeus, and, shockingly enough, Mary Magdalene. These books were deemed not appropriate for the Bible by the people who were putting the Bible together. In fact, they were so inappropriate that there was an order to destroy them all. And somehow somebody took these books and hid them away in a cave in Egypt for 1,600 years until they could be unearthed and brought forth. So, again, as I said, are these all the literal words of the man that we knew as Jesus of Nazareth? We don't know. But each one of them has a meaning for us as it comes alive inside of us. Our task now, and has always been, is to not take it literally, but to find meaning and inspiration in the words as we contemplate them, the words as we take them into our soul, and to look for that truth that is revealed to us through us. This is the example that Jesus brought forth, was taking in the message and letting it become alive inside of us. So in the book of John, it begins with the phrase, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God." And then a few lines later it said, "And the Word became flesh." I think this is a key statement of Jesus' ministry, is that we have this word, this idea, this truth, this perfect emanation of that thought, and we allow it to become flesh within us. We allow it to become alive within us. The truth has always been the truth. And as we take that truth into contemplation and it actually begins to grow in us, then we get that feeling that I say, and I say this a lot, is we know what we know and we can never unknow it. When the truth has come alive inside of us, there is nothing that can happen to make us not think that that is the truth. So what is that truth? That universal, all-pervasive truth that we can never unknow? Well, that truth is that we're part of the greatest love story ever told. Ever written, ever conceived of, ever brought forth. We, each one of us individually, is an integral part of that divine love story. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, puts it this way: God, the divine creator, never had but one child. This child is being born at every season, in every place, through all races and in all nations. Every birth is a divine event. Every conception, immaculate. Every child who is born into the world represents the child of the eternal parent.
Keeping it real with Reverend Laura.